Hey all, and welcome to another detailed tutorial. Stonehenge, at least 5,000 years old according to archaeological evidence. It was used as a burial site for part of its long history, but it's also believed that it has been used for a ceremonial site, religious pilgrimage destination, final resting place for royalty, and a memorial. And today I'll be recreating this iconic location in HO scale. Most of the heavy lifting will be done using the new Anycubic Photon Ultra, who is the sponsor of today's video. Most consumer resin 3D printers use LCD screens, which create a mask on the LCD screen, only allowing the UV light to pass through in selected areas of the screen. The Photon Ultra uses DLP technology. A mirror directs the UV light onto the bottom of the resin tray. As a result, the pixels are sharper, and there is no light drop off towards the edges of the build area. It also means faster print times at only 1.5 seconds per layer. You get about 20,000 hours of use before the UV bulb will need replacement, as opposed to LCD screens that have about a 2,000 hour lifespan. Starting on the 15th of September 2021, and for the next 30 days, the Photon Ultra is available on Kickstarter for a special early bird price. The Photon Ultra is set up and prepared in a similar way to LCD printers. The build plate is installed and leveled according to the supplied instructions. The resin vat is slid into position and the locking screws tightened. An adequate amount of resin is poured. The volume markings on the side of the vat are very handy for ensuring you have enough resin for the item you're printing. And once the lid is on, we're ready to print. The model I'm using was purchased from Cults 3D. It's not a perfect replica, however it's reasonably close, although I did end up adding a few extra stones to complete the model. The file comes as one big object. To split it into individual stones, I used Mesh Mixer and used the Separate Shells tool. This breaks down the file, and I was able to save each stone as an individual file. To ensure all the stones are correctly labelled, I use a map from the website Stones of Stonehenge. Once the stones were saved, I altered the stones to be smooth. That way I didn't get confused on which stones I'd already saved. Next, it was just a matter of scaling the stones so that they were HO scale. Microsoft 3D Builder was more than capable of doing this. The Stones of Stonehenge website has a very accurate description and measurements of the stones, so it was quite easy to find the information I needed to scale each stone correctly. The last bit of preparation was to hollow each of the stones in Mesh Mixer. The stones are quite large, so hollowing them will save quite a lot of resin, and resin isn't cheap. Now we just need to import the file into Photon Workshop. Raise the model, add supports, and then slice the file so it's ready for printing. The Photon Ultra uses a USB to transfer the files onto the machine. Before printing, be sure to double check the locking screws for both the build plate and the vat are secure. Now's a good time to get some lunch while we wait for the model to print. Resin doesn't mix well with skin, so you'll want to use some gloves. You'll also need some isopropyl alcohol to wash the model, and a spatula to remove the model from the build plate. The supplied spatula is quite blunt, so I ended up sharpening it. Again, don't forget gloves. When I'm handling the unwashed model, I try to keep the hand that uses the tools clean, and the other hand is used to hold the resin model. That way my tools stay relatively clean. Each stone is washed in isopropyl alcohol for a few minutes. From this point on, I don't physically touch the stones until they get cured, however it's still probably a good idea to keep the gloves on. The stones get a final rinse in some clean alcohol and then left to dry. The final cure is done using a UV light. The Anycubic wash and cure machine works quite well for this. It does have a wash feature, however I tend not to use it for very small details like this, because they tend to fall through the basket mesh during the wash process. So for very small stuff, the cup of alcohol is fine. The stones are prepared for painting by removing excess support material and sanding the bottom flat. Any imperfections can be filed and sanded smooth as well if needed. The map from Stones of Stonehenge is downloaded and resized in Photoshop so that when printed will be roughly HO scale. Each piece of paper is trimmed and taped together. What's left is a scale map of Stonehenge that we will use to help position the stones as accurately as we can. To paint each stone is a 4-step process. Step 1 is priming each stone. Colour isn't so important here, however I find lighter colours work better. Step 2 is the base coat. Vallejo Deck Tan seems like a close match to what I wanted. Step 3 is an oil wash. Fantasy colour Starship Filth is thinned down with enamel thinners to create the wash. The wash will pool at the base so any excess is soaked up with a paper towel. And finally, step 4 is an off-white dry brush. It's a liberal dry brushing covering the whole model to bring out the edges of the stone detail. It will also help make the rock look brighter after the oil wash darkened it quite a lot. Now for the base. 7mm plywood works well and is rigid enough to make a good sturdy base. There's no trick to constructing the base. You could even build directly on foam board if you wanted. Having tools like a nail gun and clamps makes this process go quite fast. To combat against side-to-side warping, given that this is quite a large model, I use some cross bracing. It's quite surprising at how effective this is at eliminating any twisting and warping. Some foam board is cut to size that it will fit in the small recess. However, I cut out a small notch along the edges of the foam so it will go right to the very edge of the base. Glue really struggles to attach itself to foam, so to give it a better chance I roughen up the surface. One of the best glues for gluing foam is polyurethane glue. It expands as it cures, so it will work its way into all the small grooves and give a very strong permanent hold. For good measure, more glue is used along the corners. Polyurethane glue activates through moisture, so for things like foam and dry wood, a light misting of water will help the glue do its job. It will also expand as it cures, so weighing or clamping is a must. To give a nicer transition from the edge of the frame to the scenic area of the model, I created a gentle bevel around the edges. The good thing about extruded polystyrene is you can sand it quite easily. I also add some subtle undulations to the surface so that it's not so perfectly flat. Some of the foam broke away from the edges, and this gets patched up with some filler. Once dry, it's sanded smooth. In preparation for dirt, the base is painted brown. Any brown will do, it's just a base coat to hide the white or yellow foam that might show through. Stippling a paper towel helps remove any paint streaks. Now for dirt texturing. The base layer is Davco tumbleweed grout mixed 1:1 with dry sifted backyard dirt. For the lighter areas I use 2 parts Dunlop travertine grout with 1 part dirt. And to seal it I use scenic glue and isopropyl alcohol. The dirt can be sifted using something like this, which is a container that has a sieve hot glued to the lid, or simply an old spray can lid with a stocking. To help the dirt initially stick to the sloping edges, a light misting of glue is applied before using the sieve to apply the dirt over the entire area. I used some of the lighter colour towards the middle, however in the end it wasn't really necessary. Now it's sealed down with isopropyl alcohol and scenic glue. Once thoroughly soaked, it's left to dry. To help with stone placement, each stone is set out on the map. When happy with the positioning of each stone, its outline is traced onto the map. The stone is removed and it's put aside and marked so it will eventually get returned into the correct spot. It's time consuming but worth the effort. Now each outline is cut out, leaving a hole where that stone once was. A mark is made in the dirt for each stone. This is so the map can be lined up again after the grass has been applied. As for grass, Stonehenge is quite a well-maintained field. To replicate this in HO scale, I'm using 2mm grass fibres. I mix a variety of colours and brands to get the look I'm after. It's quite a large area, so I mix quite a lot of grass. Static tack is used to glue the grass down to the model. It's lightly diluted with a small amount of water. The static king is used to apply the grass. Once the hopper is filled, we can start applying the glue. The dirt tends to suck up the moisture from the glue quite fast and dry it out, so I work in small, manageable areas. For this size model, I'll work in 2 halves. Once the glue is down, the static grass applicator is turned on and shaken over the surface at roughly 5 centimeters. The negative grounding wire is pressed nearby to help create the static charge and cause the grass to stand on end. It can be applied lightly or heavier depending on the effect you're after. Excess is removed and the rest of the diorama has glue applied, followed by static grass. Multiple layers of grass can be applied right over the top to build up height and depth of the grass. Given this is a well-maintained area, I only apply a secondary layer of grass very sparingly. And for an extra splash of colour, some fine turf burnt grass is used in patches. Don't forget to save the excess grass for future dioramas. The grass and fine turf get a final misting of alcohol and scenic glue. The map is lined up with the marks that are faintly visible through the grass. Now each stone can be placed. Halmar Super Tack adhesive works well for this. A bead of glue is applied around the base of each stone and it's then pressed down into the grass. You'll probably need to give it a wiggle to get the grass to lay flat underneath the stone. This process is really fun because you can start to see the model come to life. Also, the grass is still slightly damp from only just being applied. Because it's still wet, it makes pressing the rocks down and flattening the grass a little easier than if the grass was completely dry. You just need to be careful you don't accidentally lean on the grass with your hand and flatten a big patch of grass. Now with the rocks placed, the map can be gently removed. I did find some of the rocks needed a bit of extra glue. Now it's just a matter of finishing the edges of the diorama with some gloss black to frame the awesome model above. Building an iconic model like this was so much fun. I almost feel like I've actually been to Stonehenge after gazing around looking at this model. If you too want to make stunning details like this, don't forget to check out the Anycubic Photon Ultra. And if you're watching this before November 15, 2021, you might still have a chance to pick it up through the Kickstarter and save some money. Cheers, and thanks for watching.